writers, agents, and publishers, for the first time since the Gutenberg Press, find themselves lost in a maze of mystery as technology alters the shape of the publishing industry. Searching for Answers is a group of writers throwing pop culture, writing, and publishing into a crucible of clarity, passion, and humor. This group is the Right Pack. In this episode, we are going to discuss the struggles that come trying to find your voice and maintain your voice as you write, and also as you jump between types of writing. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Right Pack Radio. This is your host and producer, David Allen Lucas, author of Crazy Things, teacher of martial arts, and voice actor. Right now, I've been having the video log called My Journey going. Started up in January, and this should be airing in February. So the only thing I'm going to share real fast is on Fridays I have one episode that is live. You can, if you go like my Facebook author page, you can get the event with the link to come join me live and be able to talk to me there, or I will be also still doing it on Facebook Live simultaneously. There is a delay between the two, I will say. And it's called Ask Away. Only because somebody always took Ask Me Anything.
Well, all of Reddit took Ask Me Anything.
Yeah. And I do
like,
hear...
There was no stealing. That's like a fake. Yeah.
Brad, do you have anything going on in the background?
Not really.
Because we're hearing noise.
Okay.
Anyway, so... Sorry, we're doing this remotely for Brad, and we're getting some outside noise here. So anyway, where was that? So Ask Away is every Friday. Please feel free to join. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to my lovely co-host across the way. Across the mic from me.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Kayembe. I'm highly distracted, but I will work through that. I write speculative fiction. I have stories published in Nightmare Magazine and Lightspeed Magazine, and one coming out in the Best of 2017 anthology that'll be out in April. I also run Amherst Writers and Artists Writers Workshops, and try to work as a writer while working with the day job.
Yeah, that's not always easy. And also, too, Kathleen will be at Gateway Con, the Gateway to Publishing Conference and Convention, occurring in June 15th, 16th, and 17th at the Renaissance Hotel in St. Louis. She is going to be running our special events of the write-ins for the writing retreat, as well as having a master class and possibly more.
Stay tuned. Demonstrating that workshop technique.
Yes.
Will. If you want to come see what an Amherst Writers and Artists Workshop is like, it is fabulous, but if you'd like to see what one is like, come to Gateway Con.
Also with us today is...
Hi, my name is Chanel A. Chan. I am a writer of various things that I can't remember at this point.
Really
Fair enough. Wow, she's having one of those days.
Lee Savage.
Yes, she's back.
Author of the erotica for the Truly Wicked. And I will be at Extreme Con in St. Robert's Community Center, June 1st. So you'll be able to see me there. You can also check out my new title. As an actress, you can check out the trailer for Saturday, the Day After Friday on YouTube. Boggle Mind Productions, hopefully coming soon to Netflix.
Ooh.
Hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
Fingers crossed. And you can catch my new book, Surrender to the Night, on Amazon.
Congratulations.
Excellent.
And also under the name Carrie Lee Williams, I do have a couple of children's books.
And also with us today is the Madame of Murder.
Fedora Amos. I write Victorian whodunits like Jack the Ripper in St. Louis and Mayhem at Buffalo Bill's Wild West. And sometime in the near or distant future, have your ticket punched by Frank James. I am also president of Greater St. Louis Sisters in Crime.
Excellent. And our resident artist?
Artist in residence. My name is Jennifer Silzer. I'm a children's book author and illustrator. My fantasy novel Threadcaster is available on Amazon, as is my picture book, Dog Park, which sequel should be coming out this spring if all goes well. So keep an eye out, spring 2018, for Dog Park 2, which is all about how my sister's dog doesn't know how to share.
The important part of sharing.
Life lessons.
It may or may not end in the kiddie pool.
And also coming to us remotely is our one and only steampunk captain and master of the airships himself.
Yes, Brett R. Cook. Let's see here. I have a new series out, so check out Tales of the Gear Blade. It is a brand new steampunk adventure. Definitely read the first episode for free. You can find it on my website, you can find it on Smashwords, and you can find it as a flip book at Steampunk International. International Steampunk Guild. Gotta get that right. And then, since it is February, to everyone out there, at the end of this month, you'll be able to check out episode 2, The Mentor, coming out very soon. Check all that out. I also have Steam Tree for the younger steampunk fans out there. And, of course, as always, the Iron Chronicles is complete. The trilogy, is ready for all to read. Check it all out. It's at bradrcook.com. You can find out all you want to find out.
Excellent. Today we're going to talk about the struggles of voice. Now, there's lots of things we can cover, so I'm going to throw out some comments and throw it open to everything. First off is finding your voice. That's one thing that a lot of newer authors struggle with the most. Losing your voice. When it decides that it's unhappy with you because you've ignored it due to life or whatever, and trying to coax the rotten child of a brat back into your work life. Not that I suffer from that at all. And also, too, the way voice can change between things that you write. And I think, let me just throw out a personal opinion. There's nothing here that I'm about to say that I can prove. But at least when I was growing up and dealing with certain kinds of teachers, they really didn't understand voice. They didn't understand why writing essays or short stories would be difficult. If you can do one, why can't you do the other? So, and my response to that, as I'm now an adult, I write with a completely different voice when I do nonfiction versus fiction.
Oh, I thought we were going to have to bleep that out.
No. I try not to bleep.
Decision, bleep.
Yeah. Yes. And with that, let me go and start off with, please share. I like to have some personal stories about struggles you've had with your voices.
I can share a similar one to the one that you shared. While I was working on Threadcaster, I was working on the final draft of it before I did like final draft. So this was years ago. I was also doing some ghostwriting work for my uncle, who's CPA, on a book about non-for-profit governance. And I had to explain to my mother and my aunts and all of my relatives why it was so difficult to switch between forms of writing. But as you can imagine, a fantasy novel for young adults and a nonfiction book about nonprofit governance have very, very different voices. They sound different, and you have to change the way your brain creates sentences to write between the two. The sound of a book written by a CPA is the most like passive voice, purple prosy, jargon-filled nonsense that I didn't understand half the stuff I was writing. But the best way to get into that voice is to read some, and then you can't help it, and you're stuck there.
What's a CPA?
The CPA is like a business consultant.
Yeah, certified public accountant.
Yeah. So my uncle, if anyone out there works for a nonprofit, he specializes in universities. He comes in and he helps with boards of directors and hiring and firing, and he does seminars to give you strategies for that. and his book is called "Taking Your Seat at the Boardroom Table." Oh my gosh, I should know the name of the book I helped. You don't get to hear, like, I said I helped ghostwrite some of it, but I wrote the first drafts that he then went in and edited thoroughly to make sure that it was correct. So you're not getting my opinion on it; you're getting his opinion on it. But it was an education in writing a very clinical voice, and then trying to switch and write a very adventuresome kid, youthy voice. Mm-hmm. So there's my anecdote on that.
David, didn't you have something similar with your work?
Oh, yeah. My previous career, which was in healthcare and dealing with the legal field, in short, I dealt with Medicare, I dealt with the state regulations. And you know those lovely books that come out with all your benefits in it? I had to write those. So I am a highly published author, technically. Never saw a penny for it outside of the salary, of course. And I can guarantee you it's not stuff that's well read, because I was also on the appeal committees sometimes, and they're like, "Where's this at? I don't see it." Page 46, section B. There.
Real quick, the book is called "Claiming Your Place at the Boardroom Table" by Thomas Bakewell and James J. Daraji. So check that out. There's my plug for my uncle's book. He's very well informed.
And so, yeah, I did have some of that, and then I'm going to share a little bit later where I actually got my two voices to cooperate with each other. I should get them to do it now. Chanel, you had your hand up, and then Brad, then I'm going to come over to Lee.
Okay, just with regards to finding your own voice, that was actually kind of difficult. I feel like that's an understatement, because everyone deals with it and they know how much it sucks. Because I parrot really well. So, like, like, if someone says, "Okay, Chanel, you're going to write a Swiftian poem on this subject matter," okay, I do it. It comes out at 118 lines. I don't mind. You tell me, okay, write in the style of X author, I can do that. I parrot really well. But the issue is, when it comes time for me to tell my own stories and come up with that, I either am inconsistent in voice, which really bothers me. Like, I'll start out the story in one voice, and then this is why I like to write stories in one sitting. If I take a break and come back, then my voice will be completely different for the same story. Or I end up with this weird sort of hodgepodgey, not quite high fantasy feeling, not quite urban fiction feeling, really bizarre mixture, and it's really unhappy making. So, like, that's just a perma struggle, because, like, if I'm not careful, I find myself kind of lapsing back into those habits.
Well, we'll have to bring that back up again when we talk about strategies.
Yeah. Yeah, who's got dovetails?
Oh,
sorry,
well,
I'm seeing dovetails up there.
Now that Jen has said we were going to bring that back up, then I will save my point for when we talk about
that.
Yeah,
you and me will have to remember to bring it back up so we can talk about strategy.
All right.
Okay, over to Brad and then to Lee.
Yeah, so I have the also the conundrum of the multi-voice. And for me, it was kind of an interesting one, because I started off creative writing as a kid and not really understanding voice at all. But then when I hit the stage and was writing for the plays and stuff, it is very much a voice of the... it's kind of a mix of what you'll hear. It's like, but you'll always hear like a beat, a rhythm to what the playwright does. Simply because there's a beat to theater. And that's where I kind of started to understand it a bit. But then I went into business writing, which is the most boring thing you can have. Probably next to what Dave did. Writing technical manuals, which is all jargon and 1,000 words in a row that make no sense and isn't really a sentence, but it has to be that way because that's the way it makes sense to an engineer. So and then writing procedures and stuff like that for companies was also, let me tell you how much fun that is, writing a 37-step process on how to input something into a computer is,
Some of us like that,
much fun.
but okay.
Well, that's why there's room for everyone to have different clients.
No,
Right.
I get it. Hey, this is why I'm very good at explaining things. But in how to walk people through procedures. But it amuses me to no end. And then to switch back to a novel, and this is why I say that the magic is always in the rewriting, because I will always find passive voice. I will always find bland writing. And I always find business writing in my first drafts. It just works its way in there. It's just going to do it. So that's why I love the editing process, because you get to go in and take all that stuff out, make it sound, happy and pretty and something somebody actually wants to read and not chuck across the room.
Yes.
So my experience with this I started out creative writing, and then I went back to school and I had to learn to do technical writing for essays and papers for nursing school and now healthcare management. So I've come in with the struggle of, now that I finally got that working, and now I can't go back to my creative writing because my creative voice has said, no, now you've ignored me for X amount of months. I'm not going to talk to you anymore for right now. So that's where my struggle is. And then I also have had to bounce from adult writing and children writing, which is very different voices. And my kids keep saying, when are you going to write another children's book? And I'm like, well, that voice isn't talking to me anymore either right now. So good luck with that.
Go ahead, Chanel, and then I'm going to go.
I used to make up, like, especially for academic essays, I used to, like, you know how they say you have to have an interest-catching intro?
Oh, I'm dovetailing into you.
Yeah. I would write the most ridiculous, like suspense and drama-ridden, like, microfic to intro into my story, into my essays. And my teachers, I don't know if they loved me or hated me. I'm pretty sure they hated me. But I didn't care. I'm like, I still got an A. Whatever.
She's sitting over there cracking her knuckles thinking there's nothing technically wrong with this.
I don't know. Your default is to think people dislike your writing, and I think that is entirely false. So I'm guessing your teachers loved you, and you just assumed the other way.
Well, in my case, because I'm going to jump right in with what you have there, my perfect example, I've been holding off on this one. I actually got my two voices to work together when I worked on my master's thesis, which it was total quality in healthcare. Total quality management in healthcare. Yes, can we get boring? And I did exactly what you did, and I know that the professor absolutely hated me, my advisor, because he comes walking by as he's putting people's papers down, and he slams mine down, upside down, says, I hate you. Literally his words, I hate you, and then kept walking. And by the way, it was an A+. So what it started off with is, and I think I've talked about this before in other episodes, but maybe not, is your firstborn child is falling down the basement steps. You yell down. There's no response. You go running down, and then you find your child. Now I'm abbreviating it. You find your child unconscious, not responding. You get in the ambulance. You go to the hospital. They shove papers in your face, and you've got to sign them. And at that point, I ask the question: but do you even care if they follow total quality management at this point? And there it went from there. Brad, you had something you wanted to say.
Yes, I totally wanted to jump in with Lee and agree that writing for adults and writing for children is two very, very different voices, and those voices don't play together at all. So it is an amusing thing to have to do especially now, because I'm writing both Steam Tree and Tales of the Gear Blade. The second one in Steam Tree and the rest of the series for Gears Blade. Right now I'm doing both, and one is very adult and the other one is children. So it is a interesting switch to have to make sure that the children's stuff doesn't contain any of the craziness or the purple or the higher diction and stuff, but really the violence and all the other good stuff. So yes, definitely the voice change there is an interesting mix to have to play with.
Sorry about that. Go ahead, and then we'll do Kathleen then.
It seems to me that voice is more about expectations and what you do to adapt to them. regardless of what kind of writing you are doing. As if you're writing technical things, then you must take your technical jargon, your technical information out. Creative is different. And everybody does it, and we can do it because we're people. Look at everyday writing. A note of condolence is not going to have the same tenor, the same tone, as a little snarky birthday verse that you would write to a personal friend of yours. So we simply must adapt. And we have to do that perhaps 1,000 times a day. It's not something really unique to writers. It's something everybody does. We just have to find a consistency in the different voices that we use for fiction, which could be very serious and somber. They could be sexy. They could be for children. They could be uplifting. We need to channel each of those separately, is what we really need to do if we're going to write anything anybody wants to read.
And before I let anybody else go, I just want to, because since we're not on video, I just want to point out, I'm kind of chuckling at this. The at children was aimed more at Jen and Brad that she was pointing at. The sexy part was aimed over at Lee. And she had some more serious and somber aimed at yours truly. And with that...
Well, I'm glad, Fedora, that you brought that up, because I have some questions about what voice really means. Like there's the author's voice, the way that they write things, but they also have to adapt to whatever tone it is that they're writing for whatever work it is, the genre expectations that they're writing, the character points of view that they're using, if they're using points of view or if they're using over the shoulder or omniscient or first person, and who their audience is. Like, voice is a mesh of so many different things. And voice, for me at least, changes from piece to piece. It's piece specific. Like when you're changing voice in real life, when you're not writing, when you're with other people, it's called code switching, and that's basically what you're doing on paper. You're code switching because whatever is most appropriate for what it is that you're doing at the time that you're writing is what you need to use.
Who's actually dovetailing? Who's got?
Let Brad go.
I know I got Brad.
Dovetailing Kathleen.
Okay.
Basically, I just want to throw out that I think Kathleen is completely right there, and it's actually the thing I struggled with to understand the most about when I started as a writer, were like, "Oh, you must find your voice, find it." And so I sat down and I was like, "Where is my voice?" And to be honest, it never came. I still don't understand voice to the point, but that is exactly what Kathleen just ran down. Is exactly how I became to understand exactly what voice is. And yes, though we are code specific, we are specific about each project we use, as I was mentioning. I switch my voice up depending upon adult and children's writing and steampunk versus other writing that I do. What I find is, and being in publishing really taught me this, that as authors, we have go-to words and go-to phrasing and things that we like to use and put in, the way we like to frame shots, the way we like to have scenes unfold. All of that becomes voice. And to be honest, when you start to realize that, that's why they always say you can open up a book and realize who the author is just by reading the words. Because, somebody like Dumas sounds completely different than J.K. Rowling, the way they write. And it's not just that a century or more puts them apart. It's that the way in which they write is different. So I just want to jump in. Kathleen was completely right on that. And that's actually how I learned what the industry term of voice really means.
Chanel, Jen, Fedora.
So I guess my question would have to be, for those of you that I guess you could technically say that we all hop voices, but specifically for those who have very different genres that they start on, like Brad and like you, Lee, do you see any evidence of sort of that cross-pollination in your works? You notice, even in your children's works versus your adult works, you notice something that you do in both of them?
I am bad at word repetition, no matter what I write. So with any genre that is like, mostly because I can't sit and write it all at once. So when I come back, I forget I've used those phrases or those words. So no matter what genre I'm writing in, I always have to be vigilant on that. That's the only thing I can think of specifically that, like, over no matter what genre I'm writing, that follows through. Because there's so much difference between my children's books, because they're like really little children, and my adult books, which are really adult. There's no crossover there.
Straight from rated G to double X.
Yeah, we went from toddlers to
Making toddlers.
yeah, the before and after effect,
Okay, Jen, and then Fedora.
Did Brad have an answer to?
Oh, yeah, actually I do.
Okay, cool, thank you.
The notion of being, so one of the things after I published Iron Horseman that people told me that I was not expecting was how detail oriented I am. They're like, God, you include so much details, and I didn't really think I had. And I've come to realize that level of being able to describe something very succinctly and, comes very much from all that technical writing. Having to write that technical thing that makes no sense and make it sound like it has sense kind of taught me how to do that in fiction.
Jen?
I would like to take sort of springboard off of the query and take it back to the direction of like voice tips and things by also bringing in industry stuff, because I like to highlight industry stuff when I can. I know a lot of authors that are listening who have gone through the querying process have probably gotten a rejection that said that they didn't get your author voice, or your character's voice is not clear, and it's horribly frustrating. Yes, didn't connect with your voice. It's horribly frustrating because voice is something that, as we've heard around the circle, can mean many things and has so many different sort of depth layers. Voice is like a parfait. When the industry professional is asking, if you submitted your novel and they said, I don't connect with your voice, your character's voice, what they're saying is they're not connecting with the character as it is present in the narration. So that leads me to the tip I wanted to bring up when Chanel was talking about the fact that she'd come back to a story and it would have absorbed the voice that she was using on her last project. That's because you were still writing in sort of the subconscious character of that last project. So the way that I, and I'm not to toot my own horn, I have been praised for my voice before. I think it's because I'm such a character snob. Like, I'm always into, like, character this and what's the motivation of that, and did I mention Londo Mollari, that kind of stuff. But when I write Threadcaster, I've written other pieces in different POV, but I write Threadcaster third person limited, which is basically first person only told from outside the body of the lead character. The camera's following one guy around for the entire scene, and everything that is seen by the camera is implied to have been seen by the character. And I can write different characters in different scenes with different quote-unquote voices. It all still sounds like me because I wrote it with, like, my pacing and my timbre and all that. But I'm play acting. I'm putting myself in the place of the character, thinking about what the character's observing, what it would remind him of. If I've got my two main heads in Threadcaster is Kat, who's the main character, and Trace, who's like the main bad guy. And Kat is this naive mountain girl who's never been outside her small town and thinks that everyone should get along. But she's also got a fierce anger toward people who are critical of specifically curses, because Peter's a curse, so she's protective of him. Then Trace over here is, I was raised in this really strict law-abiding society, and I know what's right and wrong, and not only that, but my job is to be the authority on what's right and wrong. So the same scene can take place with both of them in it, and the camera will jump from one to the other at the break of a chapter, or the pacing break, an asterisk break, or whatever. And when Kat is saying, I can see the judgmental eyes of all the people around me, Trace is saying, I see the fire and fury of the loyal. Like, they're seeing different things. And, Kat probably wouldn't say, I see the fire and fury of my friends, because she's a 16-year-old. She would say, everyone looks really into this. But Trace would never say, everyone looks really into this. He would say, the fervor in this room, you know. And so playing a character lets you sort of grab that voice again, because when the agent says, I didn't connect with your character voice, it's because your 16-year-old character said, the whistling winds through the upper trees, and it didn't feel right. Or the other side is that there was nothing really character-driven to it. You know, if my character really likes trees, maybe they'd say, the whistling wind through the upper trees, but if it's established that your character is, like, a navel-gazing emo, then he's like, the dirt is loamy today. And it's teaching you about the character through the narration as well as through character dialogue. So that's a voice thing, too. So that was my bit.
I'm going to circle back to that. I want to let Fedora go because she's been waiting so patiently.
Sorry, Fedora.
I'm coming right back to you.
It took a long time.
No, I'm coming right back to you. Go for it.
Well, I think you have a very good point. And what it illustrates is that voice is operative on more than one level.
Mm-hmm.
You were talking about interior voices inside the story. You were talking about character voices of the characters in the story. But you also have an author voice, which is distinctive. So try not to get those two things discombobulated together, confabulated together in any event.
A perfect example. Fedora's the only one who would use confabulated.
But each of your characters needs a personal character voice, and I think that's a very good point. But often what the agents and the editors are talking about when they're talking about voice is the voice of the author that either speaks to them or doesn't. And it's an inspirational kind of thing. Let me read you a little thing from Anne Rice. It's called The Book That Changed My Life. And you may be surprised at what it is. If anybody would like to take a guess, what changed Anne Rice's? She writes about vampires all the time.
Her religion.
Well, she did until she ditched it.
It was Charles Dickens' Great Expectations. Why? And I think this gives you the real fundamental building blocks of what an author's voice is. Why she developed hers. She says, I identified with the young hero Pip in wanting a more beautiful and refined world for himself, in wanting to escape the position into which he was born for a world of grace and opportunity. So that's the first one. A key character that you can identify with. That is the cornerstone of creating your voice. But then she goes on to say, I love the great, grim, gothic world of Miss Havisham's house, into which Pip was plunged as a child, where he encountered mystery, cruelty, and beauty in the person of Miss Havisham herself, abandoned on her wedding day and determined to wear her rotting wedding dress and veil until she died. So, we're now talking about the atmosphere and the key themes. So when you add key themes and character and atmosphere, you are developing a voice. And that's Dickens. And guess what? It certainly shows up in Anne Rice's.
Yep, agreed. I'm actually dovetailed to both of you, both Jen and Fedora.
Yes.
And I really want to talk about, as you were talking about, let's go into strategies, and I'm going to throw us for a little curveball. I'm coming at this now from a different angle, but I want to let you guys go back to your normal angle. I'm coming at this as the voice actor rather than the author in the room. And one of the things in which, as I've been learning over the last year, is trying to get myself into the characters that you guys, well, not just you, but the authors write. And I don't mean just the characters like Pip and so forth, but exactly what Fedora said, the author's voice. And one of the interesting things is how quickly I've become adept at noticing works that were not ready to be published yet, because they definitely did not have that distinctive voice and so forth. It is one of the things which I'm trying to bring to my writing, but when you're having to take someone's book and make it into an audio book, or you're taking someone's commercial script and trying to make a commercial, etc. And I can keep going down that line. You don't have much to go with when you first start reading. You have just maybe a paragraph, maybe a page. And you rely on what's the written word and the way they've written it to give you an idea of what this character is. Who is this person? Probably one of the best ones, and I'm still struggling with his work right now, but one of the best ones is The Vampire by John William Polidori. Did I get the name right? Polidori is correct. I may have his first and second name wrong. Anyway, and I've only been preparing this thing for a demo, so I've really only got his first paragraph of this book. But from doing it over and over and over again, I get the sense that this is actually being told from the vampire's point of view. I could be wrong. But once again, all I have is that paragraph to tell me what this character is. And I've got to translate this paragraph into the character, into my voice, so that the reader understands it. And really, it's the same thing as what you have when you're writing a novel. So, go for it.
I think that's a very good point. If you read a play, for example, all you get is the dialogue and maybe a few sparse stage directions. I'm sure Chanel knows a lot about that. But you, as an actor or a director, must bring everything else that's needed to make an entire production from it. And that's the part that is the author's voice also. Certainly the dialogue is really your character's voices, but your voice is in the narration. So that is the part that you need to create those gloomy, if it's a gloomy kind of thing, or snappy and peppy, if it's snappy and peppy, or whatever it is, the feeling that goes around the novel, because that is the thing that agents, editors, and readers fall in love with.
And I'm just going to throw in just a little piece, and I'm going to turn this over to everybody else. Fedora mentioned stage play. I'm going to say screenplay. If you write a good screenplay, it's exactly the same type of writing in the sense of lack of detail you're giving out. You want to leave the data to the actors and to the director to come up with their interpretation of your words. And with that, Kathleen, nope, Brad, you got something?
Yeah, I'd actually have to say that's not entirely true.
Okay, please rebut.
As a playwright, you are most definitely putting your own stamp on those. I mean, it's entirely about the playwright and what the world he created, and it's up to the director to interpret how that goes across. But the actual scene that's playing out, the words that are being said, the way in which the actors are kind of instructed to pass the dialogue, whether it's quick or whether it's fast or whether it's slow and monologue-ish, these are all things that the playwright decides on. So I would argue that, yes, every time the actor and the director are going to have a say in what is said, but the playwright is huge in that process.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Brad, because clearly I did not state what I said correctly. Because you're right. What he said is absolutely right. What I mean is, if you look at some screenplays. I have not read stage plays that have not actually occurred on stage. So screenplays, it's like you come in scratching yourself, scratch your chin, and then look ponderously at the ground, wondering what's going on. And meanwhile, this other character should be doing this, and then in the background this. And you end up with an entire paragraph of description of how the actor is supposed to be acting versus, as you said, Brad, this needs to be delivered quick. This needs to be delivered in such a way.
Well, keep in mind that there's both an original and adapted screenplay.
Oh yes.
Category and major award. Like there's real work and craft that sets some above others.
Well, yeah. Let me add that.
Setting a tone and a mood.
Let me add that as well. You've got, when it comes to the screenplay, you've got multiple writers involved. You've got the guy or gal, who's been having to write this and has had well over a month to write it, sometimes years. Then you get all the way down to the writer who's actually on the set, who's having to make changes on the fly to it. So yeah, there's a big difference. Go ahead.
Well, when you give your work over to somebody else, they can make so many changes in it that you won't be able to recognize it, and you will in fact hate it. And that has happened with many authors. I listened to Robert Cranks the other day at the library, who refuses to let Elvis Cole and Joe Pike go into the hands of any screenwriters. He says that he is not finished with those characters, and he's not going to let them go in his own lifetime. He has, however, had a number of his other books that are standalones, and he let them go because he was finished with them. So be careful of what you're doing, because yes, it can be seriously changed, and it can be turned into something seriously far away from what you had in mind. Have you ever gone to a live play or seen a television program that seems so very different from the book that it came from that you can barely recognize it? Gosh. Let it into other people's hands and they will change it, which means that your voice is going down the tubes. In some cases, that can be a good thing, but I think not something you want.
Coming right over to you, Kathleen, but we do want to get back to the strategies on voice, but example of what you're saying, perfect example is Agatha Christie. She has, according to my understanding of how her will read, her will will not allow the Mousetrap to be made into a movie until it's off of London stages. And so far, as I heard, it's still on London stage. Go for it, Kathleen. Over to you.
Well, the thing with voice when it comes to adaptation is that adaptation is really tricky, and when you switch mediums, the voice that is appropriate changes.
The code switching.
Exactly, you need to code switch appropriately. So there are novels that are perfectly good novels that are made into films that are different, but they have been changed to match what is appropriate for film. So I don't know that that's necessarily something we want to get into today. No. But adaptation and switching mediums is an entirely different subject. Yes.
Have we done an episode on adaptation before?
No, I don't think we have.
I thought we did one. I thought we did one in the early season, but maybe I'm wrong.
In the early season we did. I think we also discussed doing a show where we went over something in depth that was adapted from one medium to another, but we haven't done something like that.
Maybe it's something that's good. So, what are some of your strategies? I'm throwing this out to everybody. Some of your strategies when you approach what you're writing, especially if you're changing between genres and types of writing. How do you do it? How do you get and also along with that, I'm going to ask, how do you get that brat of a voice, I'm referring to my own, out of the corner, stop acting like a brat, and actually join in? Because they're feeling like they've been ignored for so long. Feel free. I think, Lee, you had yours up first.
Go around in a circle.
Yeah.
All right. Mine may not be the quickest way because my voice is very stubborn. So what I have to do is almost cleanse my palate for a little bit. I take a break from all writing, watch TV for a while. Then I like to start back with reading some of the genre that I'm going to be writing in again and try to find that inspiration again, try to create that passion back again. And then once I start feeling that passion, all of a sudden that voice will wake back up. Now, sometimes that might only take a week. Sometimes it might take 2, but it has taken longer before. Sometimes it takes that certain book that I found that I read that is boom, now I got that idea again. Now I have that spark. Or maybe sometimes it's a movie. And I connected with a character and I was like, that reminds me of this that I wanted to work on, and now I have the words for it. So that's kind of what I do. I have to do a cleanse, and I don't expect to write anything for at least a couple weeks. I just want to enjoy getting into other stuff that inspires me and try to find the passion again.
Do you mean picking back up a project that you had to put down for a time, or do you
It can be that. It can be I'll pick on Brad. He's had to write this technical book, turn around and then write a kid's adventure. That's a whole different thing. Like Jen had to do as ghostwriting on a book for CPA versus her own fantasy writing. So it's open to all of it.
All right. Well, so Chanel had mentioned that she's a very good parrot, and I think that something that writers do, or at least I did, to learn was reading a lot of one particular author and then reading a lot of a different particular author and kind of when you do that, you kind of absorb their voice in the same way that like you absorb the forms of how to tell a story with plot, structure, pacing, like character arcs. Like you absorb these things as you read them. So, Lee, what you said about kind of doing a cleanse, like if you have somebody else's voice in your head and that's what's coming out, you have to put them down. Like you have to change up what you're reading or what you're taking in, or you just have to go on a reading deprivation type thing and just not take in anything. So
Sorry.
like the Artist's Way has something called Reading Deprivation Week where you don't get to have words. Like TV, words, books, words, anything, words, radio, music, no. Everything deprivation week. And by the end of that, you are so sick of not having words coming in that you will spew words out. So that's helpful if you really want to do a hardcore cleanse. But
If I could go that one.
Right, that seems
Wow.
really intense.
So in The Artist's Way, the book, she has it as Reading Deprivation Week. But in her project since then, and like her in depth in The Artist's Way on her website, she's like, actually, it's everything deprivation. I was trying to be nice, but no, it should be everything deprivation.
No.
I'm
So
only alive for so many hours. I'm gonna watch my shows.
it's an interesting choice. It's hardcore, but something that another author, Heather Sellers, recommends doing when you're getting into a genre and you're wanting to write something in that genre is what Lee already does, which is read a lot in that genre, and you'll kind of absorb the form and the voice that is typical. But honestly, like, I reread what it is that I've written if it's a project that I put down, and I try to get back in the characters' heads and I try to write. And it might not work very well for the first few days, but after a while, like, your subconscious will be like, okay, I see that you're serious, so you are undumped, and we will do this together, and it'll step up.
Jen.
I know I've mentioned my strategy for getting into character, and it's the same as getting into voice before. I like to do stuff like draw pictures and free write and just sort of think real hard about who is telling the story, and then that sort of helps you get in. I wanted to share an illustration that I used speaking to, I think it was to my mother, specifically about the ghostwriting versus fantasy writing. I told her that it's different because writing like technical writing like that is very clean. And when I'm going to do my fantasy novel, I gotta dig a hole. Like you go out into the yard and you dig a hole, and you dig it so deep that you're completely inside the hole. You can't see anything else. You're just in the hole, and that's when you're in the zone. And that's when you're writing in voice, and you're making progress, and you get down there. And then when you get a call saying, we need you to come do your technical writing, you gotta get up out of the hole, and you gotta wash all your dirt off, and you gotta change your clothes, and you gotta get into that. And while you're gone, the hole is collapsing. So when you come back, you gotta dig it all out again before you can be down to where you were before. And sometimes the deeper the hole, the longer you've gotten into your book, the longer you've been away from your project, it takes even longer to dig back to where you were. And for me, that's often rereading my previous drafts, or trying to think of new, different scenes that are just brand new for my characters, just to give me that sense of what it's like in their head, to get the dirt under my nails again. Because once you scrub it all out, like, you actually have to do work to get that dirty again.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm going to let Kathleen go here in a second and say that is one of the biggest problems I had prior in my previous job, was being able to knock out. You guys, the people around the table know me. When I would write, I actually was doing a lot of words at a time. I had to spew it out very quickly, 6,000 plus words a day. And the reason why is that telephone would be ringing at any moment and take me back out of borrow your term, your dirt hole.
Yeah,
I love this. I love this description you use. Or especially if I would have 2 weeks, I had to get a novel written in, because after that, I was not going to be able to write again for another, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this, 3 to 4 months. So I love the description. Go for it, Kathleen, and then you got.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Jen,
And
I
then
was
Brad
going to
also.
say, I love your analogies. Can you just explain everything to people for me? Like, can I just have a shoulder gin that is like, hold on, shoulder gin, take this.
Yeah, I can boss people around when you need me.
Awesome, every day.
Collagen. That's what we need. Collagen. Like,
Collagen.
We need to explain something. It's collagen. And he on the phone.
Hey, okay, yeah. You got my number.
But
I'll sass at it.
so that like total immersion in the story is something that I really need to do decent work. And that's one of the reasons I like writing in 4-hour chunks, and it's hard for me to write during the week because if I get home from work and write in a 4-hour chunk, I have missed dinner, missed something I need to do like within that usual people eat dinner period, and I will not be getting to bed in time to be on time to work the next day. But like, and I know this because when I do try and write for shorter periods, I don't get to go as deep. And when I was at the Amherst Writers and Artists training, I was revising the short story that went to Nightmare Magazine. And it was right after lunch. We had 2 hours before we had to come back together. So I was like, okay, I'll just knock some of this revision out. And I went all in. Like, I was hard in that story. Like, the 2-hour mark came, and I was like, holy crap, I have to be somewhere. I am paying to be somewhere else right now. I have to stop. And I got in to sit with everyone else, and my brain was still in the story. Like, I could not understand words. So I had to journal to get back inside my own head and back into the present moment. And it took like 10 minutes before I was present in that room. So, like, when you get in that hole, it takes time to come back out. It takes time and effort. And, interruptions are the worst.
Yeah, I totally understand that whole, like, 4-hour thing. I just wanted to throw in that a sort of, like, a shortcut for me, at least, because I have the freedom to do this, is to go to a different place. Like, a physical changing of location helps you sort of, like, leave other stuff behind.
It does.
So, just throw that in real quick.
Fedora and then Brad. Actually, Brad, if you don't mind, I'm going to have you close us out.
I write series, and so character voice is something I'm pretty familiar with. As I use recurring characters, I'm now on my 6th, I'm just about to start my 6th one in the series.
Hooray!
So that is not a problem. But I know my own weaknesses, and so when I do a first pass off after I finish a chapter, I make sure that I have something in there that's funny, something that's sensory, and something that is emotional. Or at least I try to. I think I'm doing that. I may not always succeed. But those are my weaknesses, and so I must find a way to get them in there, or I lose my voice. So you have to know what your voice consists of and what your weaknesses are in order to keep it healthy, so to speak.
I will go with that. Brad, you will?
Yeah, so in order to find a specific voice, if I need it for a character or something, I will often turn to movies. Anything where dialogue's spoken, it helps us specifically with like getting accents and for me, getting English mannerisms down. I'll watch a lot of British television or a lot of old British period pieces, and I like to go to the BBC and go to the actual ones created by British people and not just ones by Hollywood. You're probably getting a bit more authenticity, but you can really get some great slang and beats of dialogue that way. But when I actually sit down, I'm writing, and to be honest, I'm actually more focused on getting the story out and getting the characters in the emotional state that I need and getting the right words on the page, doing all that kind of stuff. And specific voice, like what people would probably consider my voice, probably actually comes in way more in editing. When I actually go through and I'm polishing up everything. I often like to look at books as a sculpture in the sense that you are chipping things away and leaving something behind as opposed to building something up. And so I often like to look at the editing process as taking off that next little layer and getting the little grooves perfect and making it look the way you need. So what in the end people probably consider to be my voice probably is actually more of a product of my editing than my actual writing.
And with that, thank you all for joining, and tune in next week for yet another interesting topic in the writing industry. Take care. The new theme songs for Right Pack Radio were written and performed by Meredith Tate. All copyrights remain with her. writers, agents, and publishers, for the first time since the Gutenberg Press, find themselves lost in a maze of mystery as technology alters the shape of the publishing industry. Searching for Answers is a group of writers throwing pop culture, writing, and publishing into a crucible of clarity, passion, and